Broadcasting live on the Ops Lens app, iHeartRadio, MoJo 50 Radio, and online worldwide at thepcradioshow.com.
Make sure you get over there, thepcradioshow.com, the most low-budget internet website that you'll probably ever experience. Hey, what's going on? It's me, Stu Peters, with the Patriotically Correct Radio Show, and it's good to be here. First day on MoJo 50 Radio. First day on the OpsLens app. If you have not had an opportunity to get over there and download the OpsLens app, you got to get in there. So if you're listening on iHeartRadio, MoJo 50 Radio, obviously you don't see me. You just get to hear this glorious nonsense. If you are on the OpsLens app, you get over there, you download that thing, and although I don't get paid for television, you'll be able to see this beautiful mug as I work through this, the technical difficulties of being a TV show host, producer, television show, and station owner, as well as general manager. We do have a packed show today. Dustin Reichert is going to be joining us here shortly. He is an Anoka County Sheriff's Deputy, retired. He was involved in a critical incident, shooting, which resulted in death, unfortunately. He is an expert in the field of drugs and drug influence, and obviously has experience dealing with critical incidents, police use of force, and post-traumatic stress. He's the author of the book 1088 Officer Down, which is available. We'll tell you how to get that, where to get that, and we'll talk with Dustin regarding everything as it relates to use of force and obviously prolific times, us being here in Minneapolis in the wake of George Floyd dying on the streets at the hands of Minneapolis police. At least that's the narrative that you're hearing. Until recently, body cam footage was released that shows something that could potentially be different. In the midst of the coronavirus, we're all dealing with depression. We're dealing with anxiety. We're dealing with lockdowns. We don't know if our kids can go to school. It's the perfect storm, and we're going to talk about that. But in a conversation that I was having with a friend of mine on the phone the other day, I was talking to Travis, who I hold him in high regard. And I was talking about if I was asking him, do you remember who we were as a country, as a people, in September of 2001, specifically on September 12th? And I told him I kind of long to go back there to September 12th, 2001, not because we celebrate the most prolific or devastating attack that America has ever seen, that the world has ever witnessed, but because what happened on our soil the very next day was even more breathtaking. Because on September 12th, 2001, it didn't matter if you were a Christian, it didn't matter if you were a high priest and dealt with Wiccan. It didn't matter if you were gay or straight, Republican or Democrat, conservative or liberal, any other title. It didn't matter if you were rich or poor, divorced, happily married. It didn't matter if you were white, and it didn't matter if you were black. What mattered on that day is that you were an American. It didn't matter about the physical appearance of us. It didn't matter. We didn't see each other in the natural physical light of appearance or even ideological individual belief systems with which we were raised. It didn't matter if you had a criminal history. It didn't matter if you were a celebrity from Hollywood. It didn't matter if you were a farmer from Indiana, because from Los Angeles to New York City at ground zero, the only thing that was on fire was the spirit of American patriotism. Every household from small town Iowa to the inner cities of Chicago flew a flag representing who we were, and we were angry. I remember how angry I was, especially as it came to light what actually happened. And we as Americans were angry, and most importantly, we were united together against anyone or anything that would dare try to bring our system to its knees, the very system that provides equal rights to all Americans under the Constitution, the very system that gives every American the right to free speech, the right to prosper, the freedom to believe in whatever higher power or God you so choose, and the equal right to succeed or fail. The very system that makes our nation the greatest country on the face of the planet, and that cannot be disputed. That is a fact. About 1 million legally migrate to the United States from around the world every year and call America home. Even more come here illegally and will stop at nothing, even risking their lives in most cases, to land on American soil for opportunities provided by our system of equality. They flee dangerous countries ruled by dictators with political systems that have been proven to fail their citizens time and time again. Systems like socialism, fascism, Marxism, totalitarianism. They flee so that they can escape the systemic racism and oppression of those leaders that crave nothing but power and will stop at nothing, even murder or worse, genocide, to get it. It's in these failed third world countries where citizens are being killed for being a skeptic and speaking out against their tyrannical leaders. In these countries, they're hanged for being gay. They're imprisoned for talking to their neighbors without permission from their government. Imagine that. State-sponsored government propaganda machines known as the media control the message they hear and are forced to believe because there's no alternative message. There's no debate. There's no room for the truth because the truth is they're imprisoned. And they're slaves, given the illusion of freedom, or even worse, in many countries, they're slaves without the promise of liberty. They're threatened with their own lives, with the death of their families, the murder of their wives and children, should they choose to object to these leaders or attempt to flee in search of safety and asylum. America is the greatest on the planet because it's full of Americans who care about this country. Americans that understand that we are who we are because of what we've been through together. Not just in the wake of September 11th, in attacks that forever changed us, but because of our history. Think about that. Our history as individuals has a direct result on who we become as people. Nobody can argue that. And who we become as people is a direct reflection on the experiences that we've been through, the way we were raised, the mistakes that we made in our childhoods, young adulthood, even as grown people. We're all different. Someone, for example, that grew up in a broken home, grew up poor, grew up rich, came from a divorced home, or somebody that lived like the Brady family or Wally and the Beef. People that faced adversity and killed problems with love, like the Huxtables. It's a known fact that we are who we are because of what we've been through. A German philosopher, Friedrich, and pronunciation Nietzsche, famously said that that which does not kill us makes us stronger, which is ironic, his having been rather short and miserable. But the phrase continues to resonate with American culture, even cited in recent times by Kanye West, a black hip-hop artist, best known in recent times for his unpopular support of President Trump, and now I guess candidate for president himself, running against the incumbent for whom he was outcasted for that support. Interesting times we're living in. But if we were all given the opportunity to go back in time and delete or cancel our mistakes and hardships, the question is, would you do that? It seems to me that would just be wrong in so many ways because we'd have no idea who we are, how we got to this point. Most importantly, where to go from here. The fact that we have been through these things together as individuals and as a country, it gives us some self-identification. The thought that I was having is the fact that we're so polarized, and this is really going to be about race because the media is telling you that. They're framing the George Floyd death as a racist murder, and we'll get back to that. But the thought that I had was the fact that black people were owned as slaves for white colonizers is not a part of American history that any sensible person would be proud of, but proud rather of the strength leaders found to free slaves and turn our nation into one striving every day for equality, progressing every year for equal rights, giving every man, woman, and child the opportunity for an education, entrepreneurship, the pursuit of the American dream, blah, blah, blah. The idea that every person, no matter the color of their skin, sexual preference, political ideology, would be afforded the protection of rights by the documents that founded our country, and would be afforded the protection of our military, that we shall remain free thanks to the honor of brave men and women who have volunteered to make the ultimate sacrifice and die. in a pile of spent shell casings in some hellhole country that they've never been to as they confront our enemies that wish to bring us to our knees and do it on their soil so that the fight may never come to our shores again. Afforded the protection of our brave men and women in uniform that serve our communities as cops that'll run directly towards gunfire to protect people that they've never even met, without, by the way, stopping to look at the color of the skin of the person they're protecting. I'm going to go out on a limb here and just venture to guess. I'll speculate there's no instances in which a police officer has stopped to ask a potential victim if they're a Republican or a Democrat, if they're gay or straight, or who they intend to vote for on November 3rd before deciding whether or not they're going to provide police service. If they're going to pursue the criminal that did or attempted to bring harm to the safety of themselves, their property, or their family, that would just be a ridiculous notion, and nobody of sound mind would actually believe it to be true. Sadly, we're rapidly losing the sense of pride in our country. I don't think because Americans are losing their feeling of patriotism, but more because we're being programmed by a group of extremist radical Marxists that have hijacked a system. They've hijacked the Democratic political party in a desperate attempt to hold on to power, because it's a known fact that liberal policies are there will never be legislation by Democrat lawmakers that doesn't include the power, and they want to hold on to this power and then exponentially increase that power and authority every day. Laws and regulations rapidly flow out of Washington, restricting the individual liberties of citizens who are given the illusion of freedom while actually being indoctrinated starting at a very young age in our schools, where the majority of educators have adopted this theory of social justice in the name of apologizing to the world on behalf of Americans and apologizing to minorities in our own country for the very history that created us. Rather than teaching history to young and impressionable minds, we choose to delete, ignore, or cancel our history. We're trashing the textbooks that objectively depict American past events. We're removing statues from around the country, demanding reparations for the actions of our ancestors. Think about that. Liberal progressives actually embrace these events. They get excited, they get giddy about events that divide Americans and push their agenda by framing any crisis in the light of intolerance, painting it as hate or division or racism. The American media that used to bring you the news has become the propaganda machine for the extreme left. The New York Times and CNN will blatantly ignore black-on-black crime, murders involving guns in Chicago, by the way, the most gun-controlled city in America, or even violent riots in American streets resulting in the loss of life. They deny it. They shamelessly pretend it's not even happening, and if you should so dare to object to that denial, you'll be censored from social media, you'll be doxxed in real life, and you'll be called a racist, a heathen, for illustrating or sharing events on your cell phone or telling any truths about facts that unfold because it doesn't fit the agenda. In 2020, which by the way, this year can go to hell, the perfect storm is upon us. The threat of the coronavirus is ruthlessly displayed on your living room television 24 hours a day using a ticker to count the deaths of Americans labeled as COVID. Masks are required in most states, even while in your car, and now I'm hearing in some states in your home. Dehumanizing people, not allowing for smiles to be seen, facial expressions to be recognized by your neighbor or by your spouse, or even by the lady at the checkout station in the supermarket. Gatherings at your local parks have no doubt been banned. You will not go to concerts or rodeos. If you do, you'll be fined, even arrested, especially if you're here in Minnesota, where Keith Ellison is the attorney general. We'll get to him. You're undoubtedly not allowed to open the business you've risked, everything to start. Your kids may not be able to start school this fall, and don't you dare attend a church service or try to experience any fellowship that might bring you within 6 feet of another human. If your kids previously played sports, or go camping with the Boy Scouts, there's no doubt those events have been canceled or at least at very minimum postponed or restructured in the name of safety and protection. It's really mind-boggling. It's something that we've never seen before. Combined with the coronavirus, the China virus, extremist liberal progressives are using the tragic death of an African-American man in police custody to insert the false narrative of systemic racism amongst law enforcement officers across the country. The media is sponsoring a war on cops that indicts everyone wearing a badge and a gun for the actions of one man in Minneapolis. AOC, Rashida Tlaib, Nancy Pelosi, members of the squad, all of these feckless leaders will tell you that the man was murdered by a racist cop. It was a racially motivated murder. They'll tell you this before any facts have been brought before a court, before any evidence has been submitted for jury review, before any convictions or sentencing has been handed down by a district court judge. And don't take my word for it. Research this yourself. Within hours of the death of George Floyd, the mayor of that city, Jacob Fry, framed the death of George Floyd as racist and demanded the firing of any cop and the charging, by the way, criminally, of any police officer that was at or near the scene, promising citizens of Minneapolis swift justice and the fundamental change within the Minneapolis Police Department. Fry incited riots and not only allowed, but sheepishly encouraged violence against police officers, the destruction of property, ultimately the loss of life in Minneapolis, as criminal thugs filled the streets and committed felonies without the threat of arrest. There's two ways to get somebody to do something and almost always find success. One is to tell someone they can't do it. Oh, you can't do that. Because a challenge, I think, capitalizes on the competitive nature of another person, which almost always pushes them to do the impossible or accept the challenge. Excuse me. But the number two way to move a crowd in any direction you wish, and probably the most proven method of control, comes from using fear. Fear of failure, fear of misery, fear of sickness, fear of harm, fear of death. Facts don't matter when fear exists, and people are much more willing to do the unthinkable or make moves they would ordinarily question. For example, kneeling before a violent mob or willfully handing over your belongings because you've been encouraged to do so by an actual letter written to Minneapolis citizens by their brave police administrators, by the police department. We'll talk about that too with Dustin. So why are officials kneeling before violent criminal thugs in Minneapolis and around the country? If the movement to defund police is actually successful and the inmates are indeed running the jail, what can we expect to transpire on the streets of our once united country? What are the benchmarks that we're striving for? As violent rioters are shouting things like, "No justice, no peace," what does justice look like? When nearly every major democratically run city is on fire, police precincts are being overtaken, cops are being shot and shot at, businesses are being attacked, and literally everything's stolen from retailers as organized groups loot and pillage merchandise, where do we go from here? The family of George Floyd has repeatedly stated that Floyd would not have wanted any of this in his name. But those messages fall on deaf ears. The carrot of peace and compromise can be held in front of the rabbit, but if he's unwilling to bite, the carrot becomes useless. The Democrat Party, my friends, has been hijacked. Democrats are good people. I know them. Some of the people that I happen to be closest to are generally liberal-minded people, and I love them. I really do. They're sensible people that typically debate small points of contention that create the proverbial divide between the donkeys and the elephants. We oftentimes joke about it at gatherings of our own, but today's radicals are the true wolves in sheep's clothing. They're camouflaged in the cloak of the donkey and blue necktie, but represent something completely different. Something we've seen time and time again, something we've seen failed, and something we've seen result in the loss of liberty, the loss of freedom, and the loss of life. They're fascists, they're Marxists, they're self-proclaimed socialists, they're racists. with one single objective, and that's to gain control and power and compliance, and they'll stop at nothing to gain the control and power to make you bow, literally on your knees, to radical political groups like Black Lives Matter. The extremist liberal left is rumored to be organizing the targeting of prominent conservatives in their homes now, and violence is being threatened at the polling booths on Election Day, and for the 100-day siege leading up to this, we're well under that now. The point is they want to escalate civil unrest leading up to Election Day. They're preparing for a new terrain. Messages have been sent out about how police are more aggressively, policing, and federal officers are enforcing things. Congresswoman Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez can be tied to this. And PC Radio will get to the bottom of this. I promise to be that we will be relentless seekers of the truth on this program. Most of these elected officials from the radical left have no problems wearing the hat of a medical expert when they demand you wear a biosuit to get a damn haircut, or prohibit you from seeing your grandma in her assisted living facility, where, by the way, they have no problems placing COVID-diagnosed elderly people as a place for them to go and die, essentially turning nursing homes into modern-day progressive death camps. But ask them to talk to you about it directly, and they won't. If you ask for a civil debate, you'll be labeled as an extremist or a conspiracy theorist or a bigot. Well, they dismiss your invite as a setup or a hostile attack that may hurt their feelings. Janae Harteau, the former failed Minneapolis police chief, has been invited on this show, but at no surprise to PC radio staff, she has declined. Democrat leaders like Jerry Nadler have actually gone so far as to say the violent riots in Portland are a myth, and he's insinuated that it's not even really happening. These people are in complete denial. They're lying, and the media won't show you any of this. Why? In Minneapolis, the city council, along with Attorney General and once extremist Muslim himself, Keith Ellison, formerly Keith Hakeem, are advocating for a plan that would mirror a plan being implemented in St. Petersburg, Florida, by their police department there. This plan would send unarmed public safety liaisons or social workers to calls that police would normally respond to. Some of these nonviolent calls that would get no police response would be things like disorderly intoxication, mental health crisis, drug overdose, homeless complaints, neighbor disputes. Any sane person who's ever dealt with any of these issues being labeled as nonviolent knows that they each have an extremely high likelihood, that a suspect involved will become escalated. The scene will rapidly deteriorate, resulting in physical aggression and resistance, and require the justified use of force by a police officer to control the situation. And you might be thinking, there's no way this will happen. It'll never come to this. But look around at what police leaders are saying, and the efforts to fundamentally change policing in our major cities is endorsed by city council members, mayors, top cops, and elected officials that don't care to listen to the citizens that reside in their cities and provide, depend on that blanket of protection that's provided. The message by these leaders is suspiciously synonymous. Listen to them. The verbiage is almost the same. It's almost identical from Chicago Mayor Lori Lightfoot to Jacob Fry in Minneapolis and leaders from cities like Seattle and Portland, Los Angeles, Austin, Baltimore, and everywhere in between. They seem to be reading from the same script. They're saying, if you play the YouTube videos of Jacob Fry, if you play YouTube videos of Lori Lightfoot, if you go back and you do your research, they're saying the same thing. It's almost as it was written down and handed to them, like they're reading from a script. The question is, who's writing the script? Very interesting and challenging times. We're gonna try to figure out who's writing that script. We're gonna talk about the George Floyd incident in great detail with Dustin Reichert. He's coming up right after the break. Please stick around. Make sure to get that OpsLens app downloaded if you haven't. It's pretty interesting. Rocky Stucci has a program. The Matt Locke Show is over there. If you're listening on MoJo, iHeartRadio, stick around. We're going to be back right after the break. This is the Patriotically Correct Radio Show, live on our first day. We're glad to be here.
We will force votes.
We will not stop.
Any Republican senator is part of the cover-up.
What the f?
Impeachment.
This is madness.
The PC Radio Show with Stu and Rich. Back in a minute. Broadcasting live from the highest cloud of privileged patriotism. The PC Radio Show is on MoJo 50 Radio.
And welcome back to PC Radio. My name is Stu Peters. That guy over there, that ruggedly good-looking man, that is Richard Leonard. The first segment, I have to apologize, Richard. I kind of filibustered there, and I can filibuster with the best of them.
That's all right, man. Hey, when you're passionate about something and it makes sense, weird that happens.
Yeah.
Anywhere, but it's good, man. People love it. I love it.
Well, it's just
No
like,
problem.
like I said, I'm never going to say anything on here just because I want ratings. I don't need to.
Right.
Our ratings are fantastic. We're on every platform you can imagine. Our iHeartRadio numbers are through the roof. And this is a show that is in its infantile state. And I think the reason that that's going on is because of exactly what I was pointing out, is that people are tired of being lied to.
Yeah.
They know they're being lied to. It's right out there in the wide open. People aren't even ashamed of this anymore. Let's go back and take a look at what happened yesterday in Kenosha. This is an independent journalist recorded this right here. And let's just take a look at this here.
Okay.
All right, that is the scene that happened in Kenosha yesterday. An officer involved shooting, on Sunday, an officer involved shooting involving Mr. Blake. Mr. Blake, we have started to do some digging on him. I don't think that there's been anybody in the media that has really done any digging on him, and in the mainstream media, that is. But I've seen a lot of people independently in social media talking about this guy. You and I have taken a little bit of a look at it, and I just want to kind of show you this one more time, and we're just going to see. So let me just kind of explain what's going on here. So here's Blake. Okay, you can see there's several officers there. Okay, there he is. He's got something in his hand. He's walking away. They've already got their guns out. There he goes, reaching into the vehicle, and then there's 7 shots. Okay, that happened there, and what we were told by the media, and what we were told by the governor, and what we were told by the New York Times, and what we were told by Aaron Rodgers and LaFleur over there with the Green Bay Packers, and who else did you say? LeBron was weighing in on this now?
Yes, LeBron James, some dude that plays for the Milwaukee Bucks, is just outraged that this innocent guy was shot by the police.
An innocent guy, an unarmed, innocent black man who all he wanted to do was just de-escalate everything by getting away from these heathen, terroristic, racist, bigoted police officers who were just bullied in high school, and now they have this authority, and they're going to take all of that pent up racism that they've had their whole life, because that's how they were raised, because the only way that you would ever dare to go graduate high school, get accepted into college, put everything on the line to go get a law enforcement degree, go to skills training, go to an academy, go through the most excruciating backgrounding that you can think of, and personality tests and lie detector polygraphs, and then the field training process, which is you're scrutinized over and over again by field training officers, several different phases of that, and then go out on the street and run directly into gunfire to protect total strangers that you've never met, regardless of the color of their skin or who they intend to vote for on November 3rd. The only way that you could qualify to do all of that is if you are a closet racist.
Apparently.
Ask your dad, your black dad, by the way, who nobly served the St. Paul Police Department for how many years, and who debunks the theory of systemic racism in law enforcement every time he opens his mouth.
Yeah, we had quite the interesting conversation yesterday, and wow.
Speaking of interesting conversations, I just want to point out what happened here. One more thing, and if this doesn't show you the bias of the media, I don't know what else would. The New York Times, okay, we all know that Kenosha's on fire. It's burning. It's not peaceful. There's bricks being thrown at officers' heads while they celebrate and laugh. He just got bricked, F the police, all this other stuff. By the way, my show can be banned from YouTube, and we can be censored on Twitter and hated by mainstream media everywhere. But things like this will not get taken off as things that are graphic or insensitive. It's okay now to throw bricks at the heads of police officers and then laugh and cheer about it. The New York Times, this was an article that was just posted at 10:24 a.m. Eastern time, so that would have been this morning here. Kenosha, Wisconsin. Peaceful marches in protest of a police shooting gave way to fires. Really?
Peaceful.
So these people were just peacefully sitting around, and all of a sudden, boom, out of nowhere, there were the fires. There they were. I mean, the peaceful protesters couldn't have lit those fires. Peaceful protests.
The flames just jumped out of their ass and started a car dealership
just out of nowhere, yeah. And the dump trucks. Oh. Yeah, the peaceful marches gave way to fires. Destruction and looting in Kenosha as a strip of businesses in a central residential neighborhood were consumed in flames early on Tuesday. They just gave way to the fires. The fires were coming with all kinds of firepower and weaponry, and the peaceful protesters said, no, we're just going to give way to you because we don't know where you're coming from or who lit you, but we're peaceful here.
And so what would happen if these business owners and these homeowners that are outraged because everything they've ever worked for in their life is burning to the ground? What would happen if these folks stepped out onto the street and started airing the place out and just started dropping people that are destroying their property?
They'd be
arrested. Would they go to prison?
Absolutely. They'd be arrested. They would be prosecuted to the fullest extent of the law. They would be labeled a racist. They would be labeled murderers. And they would go to prison, where they probably would not do very well. This is what we're seeing, right. Okay? And if the media bias doesn't scare you and wake you up enough, if it's not painfully obvious to you that you're being lied to by Democrats, and not even just Democrats, I'm talking about the hijackers, because we've discussed and we've said it before, and we're not going to get into this today, but we know that Democrats are good people. I'm talking about the hijackers, the extremists, the radical progressives, the communists, the fascists that are out here burning things down in the name of racism, which is a false narrative. If it's not painfully obvious that they're taking over the media and that the media is complicit in this, they're now also politicizing the highest levels of law enforcement. They've impacted the offices of chiefs around the country who are now tolerating this, and not only tolerating it, but actually encouraging it as they're feeling political pressure from mayors and city councils inside of their cities. County commissioners like the people we saw out in Northern California with that guy the other day who was standing up for himself and his rights as a business owner. He will be heckled and deemed a racist, bigot, insensitive prick who doesn't care about anybody but himself because he refuses to wear a mask. If that isn't enough, we're now politicizing law enforcement to the point where you can be arrested for defending yourself against these thugs. And to talk more about that, we have Joe the cop on the phone. Joe is a 23-year veteran of law enforcement. Joe is still currently working as a law enforcement officer in the United States of America. We're not going to tell you where because we're going to protect his anonymity, which is why you only see a silhouette of a hero on the screen as we talk to him. Joe, welcome to this special session of Joe the cop on a, a Tuesday afternoon. And which is a little bit out of sorts because we normally love to be blessed by your presence on a Friday, but thanks for being here and making yourself available.
Yeah.
Well, you do have a penchant for exaggeration when you say blessed by my presence.
Well, it's all for ratings and shock factor, okay?
We love having you,
Well, that'll
Joe.
do it.
We were just watching this video, and we're going to show it again here real quick. For those of you who haven't seen this, I mean, you must be living under a rock, but this is what was going on in Kenosha, Wisconsin on Sunday. And here we have the scene, which no doubt you have seen, Joe. We'll talk about it here in a second. But here he is trying to, reach into the car. And then there is the 7 shots that ring out from an officer that shot him 7 times, presumably what appears to be in the back. Everybody, of course, the governor in Wisconsin, leadership in these elected officials, people that just want to protest and burn and see a way to loot on this, and then of course all of the media framing this as a racially charged murder already. What do you see here? And what are we missing? What is the media missing here, Joe?
Well, I don't think the media is missing anything. I think you could give them all the information, and more information has come out in just 24 hours that this Jacob Blake allegedly was armed with a knife. A witness reportedly stated that the officers ordered him to drop the knife. Allegedly, Jacob Blake stated that he was going to the car to get the gun. And we know that there was an active felony warrant for his arrest. Now, if we gave all this to the media, it wouldn't change anything in the way they present the narrative, Stu.
Right. And just backing up for a minute here, we did do a little bit of digging on Jacob Blake. Blake has a very extensive criminal history involving firearms and crimes of violence, including assaulting police officers and plenty of domestic assaults. There was an active felony warrant for his arrest for criminal sexual conduct in the 3rd degree. And then there was also a domestic abuse charge and something else, I believe. Backing up to what you said he told the officers he was going to get the gun. Go into detail a little bit on that because I haven't heard any of this yet.
Well, that is from third-hand information, okay? But we have enough here right now based on just an independent witness statement, okay, about the knife. They told him to drop the knife. So he was either holding a knife or they perceived that he was holding a knife. In any event, when the officers draw their guns on you, you are not free to leave at that point. Now, he goes back into the vehicle if he does have a knife, and if he did say that he was going to get a gun, and he goes back into a vehicle where supposedly 3 of his children were. Listen, this is a perfect textbook Graham versus Conner or even Tennessee versus Garner case. It's going to be a justified shooting if all that is true. And right now, we have no reason to believe it's not true. There's absolutely no reason. In what realm, Stu, do police officers, knowing that they're being recorded, draw guns on people and just shoot them in broad daylight for no reason? It doesn't happen. But it doesn't matter what I present or what you or what anybody presents, okay, to Sean King, to Benjamin Crump, to Lee Merritt, okay, to Al Sharpton, okay, to any of those race-baiting pimps. It doesn't matter what is presented to them. They will continue with the lie, and the liberals will eat it up.
Well, Joe, let's also talk about the fact that, I mean, what's done is done, but it's my opinion that if Mr. Blake would have been following the orders of the police, he wouldn't have been walking around the side of that car. He wouldn't have been reaching into that car to get shot. If you show me your hands and follow the directions that I give you as a law enforcement officer, if I were a law enforcement officer, you're going to, well, clearly he was going to jail. He had a warrant out for his arrest, but everybody else goes about their day. Nobody gets shot. No businesses burn. There's no outrage in Kenosha, Wisconsin.
Right.
Well, isn't that the way it always works? That if you comply it works out. Listen, this guy is supposedly paralyzed from the waist down right now, Rich. Wouldn't compliance have been better?
Mm-hmm.
I think so.
You know, and in 100%, you're a currently working law enforcement officer in America. In 100% of the, well, let me just ask you, in what percent of encounters with people who are suspected of committing a crime or who you know who to have committed a crime, if they're going to jail, in what percentage of those encounters do things happen smoothly when they comply with your orders or your direction?
If 10 people comply, it's 100%. Okay, if one doesn't, then we have we have 1% of the time where it doesn't, and it can turn violent and it can turn ugly. But again, that's our function as the police.
Right.
Is to meet violence with superior violence. This, by all indications, is what was done here.
The other thing, too, is it's alleged that there were 3 kids in the car, that Blake's 3 sons were in the car, younger sons were in the car, and, of course, they're traumatized for life. And I'm not discounting that. The reports of the media say that, you know, these kids will be traumatized for the rest of their life. I don't need the media to tell me that. I mean, anytime that somebody sees their father get shot by the police is going to be traumatizing. How they process that and how they justify that as they get older is going to depend on how strong they are as people and whether or not they want to see the truth about what was really going on. Their dad was wanted for criminal sexual conduct. He didn't follow the direction of the police. He didn't comply. And as a result of his decisions, he was shot by the police. But isn't it true as a cop, I'm going to ask you, that those 3 kids, it's very likely that the officers had knowledge that those kids were in that car. Isn't it their duty to protect the safety of those kids as well when he makes a move for that car? Let's just take the gun thing out of it. Let's take the knife thing out of it. Let's just say that this guy really isn't holding a weapon. The car becomes a weapon. The likelihood of him fleeing is pretty high. I mean, he's going to the car for a reason. If it's not to grab a weapon or a gun, it's to leave the scene. Chances are he's going to run somebody over on the way and then flee at high speeds. These kids are in the car. I mean, explain that to me. What else is going on around this scene that these officers have a duty to protect not only those kids, but the other people that are standing around here?
Well, I'm just gonna go back to if he was holding a knife. That just takes everything else out of the equation. That something happened here, and it appeared that there was some struggle beforehand. Okay, before they even shot him, it appeared there was some sort of physical struggle. I'll come back to what I've always said about this since yesterday. If they thought that they could have stopped him without the firearms, they absolutely would have. Right. They would have just gone hands-on and handcuffed him. They were pointing their guns at him for a reason, and supposedly there was a taser deployment, okay? There was a taser deployment prior to this that did not overcome Blake's resistance. So there's that. If he gets into the vehicle and escapes and he's not free to escape because there's a felony warrant for his arrest, yes, the children are in danger at that point. Now, will these kids grow up okay? Well, I doubt it. I mean, they're going to be constantly told how their dad was a victim when he was not. Their dad was a criminal.
Correct.
And listen, just under like normal circumstances, you're not going to be able to convince somebody that, like, you know, your dad deserved to be shot. It's not even about deserve to be shot. It's about he acted in a way and the police reacted. So much of what police do, Stu, is based on the actions of others. We react to the actions of others. And this is what you had here. That governor knows. I believe that governor knows, that idiot governor knows deep down that this is a good shooting. He doesn't care. All right. He has to reach out to his thug voting base. He wants to get reelected. That's all this is about.
That's right.
It's the same with anything else. Sean King knows it's a good shooting. Sean King will lie. He has lied about everything his entire life.
For the listeners and the viewers who don't know who Sean King is, explain that and what you're talking about, Joe.
Well, he is a journalist that basically everything he does is takes up the side against the police every single time. But I'll tell you one thing you never see with Sean King. You never see Sean King on a show debating anything. You want to know why? Because he'd get destroyed. I would love to be on a show with Sean King for 5 minutes. I bet he'd never show his face again.
So I want to touch on something quick. Joe, is it your opinion that after just hearing a little snippet about Mr. Blake's past and his criminal history, do you think it's safe to say that the cops that were interacting with him or other cops in the community already know who he is and know his history and know that he fights with the police and know that he has these sexual crimes and all these things? It's not like they went in blind. Came into contact with a black dude that was uncooperative. I'm pretty sure that they were 4 or 5 officers deep because they already know his past. They know his history. They know who he is.
I'm not entirely sure if they knew his history. I think we there might be some safe assumption there somewhere, but we can't 100% say that at this time. We don't even know if they knew about the thing with the warrant at that time. I would assume that there was something going on there that gave the officer the impression this wasn't his first rodeo, even if they had no prior knowledge of him coming up to this incident. All right. Now, given his criminal history, we can see why he made another bad decision, because this is obviously a young man who has been making bad decisions for his whole life. You do not have an extensive criminal history at that age. How old is this guy? I think he's in his 20s. You don't have an extensive history at that age if you're making the right decisions. So once again, everything that happened here happened based on the actions of Jacob Blake. Right? The officers reacted to that.
Yeah, and so you're alluding to the individual responsibilities or personal responsibilities and the consequences that individuals can have if they make the wrong choices. So you're not speaking the language of people who oppose the facts here. I mean, you're not speaking the language of elected officials. You're not speaking the language of a lot of the police chiefs out here now that are getting down on their hands and knees, quite literally, in streets alongside of these rioters and these criminal thugs who are burning things down with the threat of no arrest or with no threat of any arrest because they're entitled.
I would have to, I would basically have to speak in the language of a pig snorting in the mud for them to have any concept, of the reality of what I was saying.
Yeah, they are.
Now,
we
don't know 100% of everything right now, but by all indications, this is looking like a good shooting. We can't say 100%, but it's looking that way.
You said that there was a taser deployment. We don't see the taser deployment here in the video. Can you kind of go through that? So the cops show up. They're here. What do you know about this chronologically from the 911 call until up to where we are? Because literally all we're getting here is we're getting the narrative from the New York Times. I'm not saying that you were there in Kenosha. I'm not saying that you have firsthand knowledge, but you're in the police community. What are the grumblings and the goings on and the mumblings in the hallway about some of the things that we might not know what happened here after the police were called to come here and deal with this out of control sex predator?
So far right now, we all have the same information. But this is why I always like to wait until we get like the full case file on it before I, write like my normal 20 paragraph dissertation. I mean, there's a reason I've always been right about these cases and the outcome of the cases, because I like to wait for everything. But right now, I think we all pretty much have the same thing. I mean, he was a felony warrant suspect. He wasn't free to leave. When the police are pointing guns at you, you're not free to leave. So they obviously saw something with him prior to that. To say he was there trying to de-escalate a fight with family members, I don't believe that bullshit for 1 minute. I don't believe that any more than I believe this bullshit that Alton Sterling was selling CDs and the police shot him. We obviously know why Alton Sterling was shot. I don't believe that anymore, and I believe this bullshit that Keith Scott was holding a book when he was shot by the police. The video shows he was pointing a gun at the police when he was shot. So obviously the police showed up there for a reason. They were dispatched there. If it was domestic, well, you already go in knowing that's a dangerous situation. Do we not?
Absolutely.
Of course we did.
Yeah, absolutely.
Okay. So the taser deployment, if he was carrying a knife and walking away from that, probably would explain why there was a taser deployment. Or the taser deployment could have been he's walking away and he's a felony warrant suspect.
You
But
had
the
something.
taser-
You had something that was on your Facebook page of the what is it called? The Albuquerque Police Department. Tell us a little bit about that. It was since deleted. Is that what we're hearing?
Correct. It was the chief, the Albuquerque Police Department chief, and that that agency is absolutely not a stranger to officer-involved shootings. They've had tons of shootings. Okay, in the last 10 years, they've all been legally justified. Even the ones where they tried to, bring the two officers up on charges.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, for murder, for shooting a homeless camper, they were not able to convict them. They've all been justified. That agency has been under, I think, a consent decree, a Department of Justice consent decree for several years now. Okay, this is a chief who decided to stick his nose into it. Okay, he decided to stick his nose into this matter and basically call the shooting tragic, and then make reference to Jacob Blake's race, and that has nothing to do with it, and basically point the finger at these officers in Kenosha, who, by all indications at this time, acted lawfully. He was just trying to pander for no other reason than he's a coward. Listen, no chief should be taking an official position on any police shooting that does not occur in his jurisdiction. If you're not the chief in that jurisdiction, just shut up.
I have to get to this because we're limited time here, but the post that I'm talking about, and I just want to say that the Albuquerque Police Department, and I want to read it because for people who don't know, because it's since been deleted, and it was deleted because he's a coward. But he wrote, quote, "The senseless shooting of Jacob Blake once again shows why our community and communities across the nation are seeking justice and change. On behalf of the Albuquerque Police Department, APD, I offer my sympathy to Jacob Blake's family and his children who witnessed this disturbing act. I sincerely hope he makes a full recovery. Chief of Police Mike Geyer." Okay, so then he deleted that because he knows that it's BS and because he's a coward, and somebody had to have told him this is not an accurate reflection of the truth.
You read it. You had it in front of you. I didn't have it in front of me at this time. But yes, what he did was he took an official department stance on a shooting. Okay, condemning the officers, and it may very well turn out to be justified. Once again, this is why, if it doesn't concern you, okay, keep your mouth shut. Because now you just spoke for your officers. Your officers are involved in shootings all the time down there. Do you not realize what this could do to you someday in court, in a civil action? If you say this shooting is wrong and your officers have a similar shooting, that could put you on the hot seat as chief. It's called vicarious liability. Just shut your mouth.
That's right.
I mean, if this guy, Albuquerque, I can see the yellow stripe down this guy's back from here, Stu.
That's too much.
Once again,
that's too much. That's too much to ask. You can't ask these people to shut up anymore because they're social justice warriors and they're going to make names for themselves. It's no secret that when somebody takes over at the chief's chair, they become a politician. They serve at the pleasure of the city council. They serve at the pleasure of the mayor. There's no secret that they could have been the best street cop on the planet. Typically not really, but they could have been at least a cop's cop. They could have been somebody who supported the actions of the police. In 30 seconds, do you have experience in dealing with chiefs like that?
No, I generally like my chief. I never really had any issues with them myself. But normally what I see with these big city chiefs that get promoted up through the ranks, they always say the same thing. Oh, he's a cop's cop. He was a cop's cop. This guy was great. And as it turns out, Stu, and I'll close it out with this, as we found out in the case of Jimmy O'Neill, New York City Police Department Commissioner, he wasn't a cop's cop. Turned out he was a coward's coward.
Mm-hmm. Appreciate having you on. It's always nice to have the professional input from somebody who's on your side of that blue line. We thank you very much for your service, and we always pray for your continued safety. Joe the Cop, right here on PC Radio. And where did he go? Did he take off there? I don't see him here anymore.
I'll see you guys in a few days.
Okay, that sounds good, and we'll have Joe the Cop back on. We did have something happen here with this, and I don't know exactly what it is that's going on. Always having technical difficulties over here with intern boy pushing the wrong button. But the scene there in Kenosha is definitely horrific. We don't wish that on anybody, and we just we understand that everybody's actions come with consequences, and we just the words of encouragement to comply with the police. And if you feel like they've done something that is unjust or illegal, you will have your day in court, at which time you can sue the hell out of everybody involved. Final words, Rich.
There it is. Wait for the truth. Wait for the truth before we start condemning people, good, bad, or indifferent.
Yep.
It's too much.
It's too much. All right. For that guy over there and for myself, Stu Peters, Patriotically Correct Radio. It always seems like it goes so fast, but we will be back tomorrow. And don't worry. Don't fear. These glowing smiles will be back on the Opslins app, on iHeartRadio, MoJo 50 Radio. Until then, here's what's up to it. Here's what's down to it. Here's to any way you can get to it. Here's to those that don't do it. May they be dragged to it, tied to it, or forced to it. And here's to us who do it, because we're the ones that's used to it. Remember, one day they're going to come for the car, and when they do, save the radio! Yeah.
Broadcasting live on the Opslins app, iHeartRadio, MoJo 50 Radio, and online worldwide at thepcradioshow.com.